there is a history of unions taking care of one group and not necessarily the other here. So we had to work really hard. The way that we've overcome a lot of this is through conversations.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
So I'm going to read this from Jack from New Jersey, because it's relevant for this portion of the show. Hey, Jake and Adam, it's Jack from New Jersey. I wanted to share some labor organizing news from around here. For the past week, this was sent 6 days ago, staff and faculty at Rutgers University were on strike, the largest public sector strike in state history. They have been without a contract since June and face the university president lying that public sector strikes are illegal in New Jersey. Demands included substantial wage increases, health insurance for adjuncts, adjunct pay proportional to full-time non-tenured lecturers instead of this two-tier nonsense, increased graduate student pay, and much more. I had the privilege of spending my afternoon Saturday supporting the pickets at the Newark campus, and the solidarity of tenure staff, students, and community for striking workers was truly inspiring. At about 1:30 a.m., Governor Murphy, union officials, and the university announced a tentative agreement. It was actually a tentative framework, not a tentative agreement, but though rank and file union members emphasized that the strike is suspended, not over, conditional on follow through with the contract. Like all workers, they play an important part in my community, and I hope they all get the contract they deserve. So that is well said, Jack from New Jersey. And here to talk about that with us, we have Hank Calais, a part-time lecturer at Rutgers University, and John Gilmer, a college worker at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and a member of the United Campus Workers, CWA, the union representing college workers here in Alabama. Hank, John, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning.
No problem. No problem. We at Rutgers appreciate the opportunity to kind of fill you in on where things stand and how we got to the point that we're on. I'll just a real quick correction. It's Calais, not Calais.
Calais. Okay.
Yeah, it looks that way, but this is it's Calais. So.
Appreciate the correction, duly noted. And so, Hank,
yes.
Really appreciate your time on the show. And so we'll go with introductions and we'll start with John. And, John, talk to us about what you do for the University of Alabama, your involvement in the union, and also maybe explain a bit for listeners some of the differences in public sector collective bargaining laws for Alabama and some of the broad strokes of differences between Alabama and New Jersey, and Hank can kind of fill in the details on the New Jersey specifics. But John, talk to us about that.
Absolutely. So I serve in student life here on staff at the University of Alabama. So I'm the assistant director of student involvement, and that means I spend a great deal of time working with our student organizations. So I'm sort of at the intersection of university policy and the student organization. So it does put me in a good position to learn a lot about the inner workings of the university and how it's affecting students and staff and faculty. So I've been here as a member of the United Campus Workers Alabama chapter for about 2 years, and I've been engaged as a campus fellow too, trying to work in a really intentional way to grow our membership. One thing to answer your question in general about organizing in Alabama, of course, we're a right to work state, and it is essentially not a possibility for us to acquire a contract. So our objectives are broadly similar in that we are advocating and rallying for better health care, better compensation, sort of institutional respect for our most vulnerable workers, but we don't have the opportunity to agitate towards something like a contract. However, that's not to say that our work can't end up with similar outcomes, but that we don't have that structure, that specific focus in our advocacy and our organizing on campus.
And so I guess just spend a little bit of time explaining, why you would then be involved in a union if you don't have this formalized process, government sanctioned process for an election and contract negotiations, because even some union members, they're like, well, if I can't do this government sanctioned collective bargaining, if I can't have, government seal of approval through an election process, then what's what's the point of being in a union? Can you even be in a union? Are you really a union? All of those kind of questions come to mind.
Yeah, well, we are workers here on campus, and I think that's where our power comes from, is in our solidarity. And so I think that what I've been encouraged by is we're mostly faculty, but I am one of we have maybe 10% of us are staff, and we have a lot of grad students. And I think one thing that I'm emerging that's been seeing emerge, it's encouraging, is that folks are realizing that even without that end goal of a contract, we're still able to influence conversations, to leverage our power collectively in gathering on campus, being seen on campus, and organizing in that way. So I think that even without a contract, it's still something that we have the powers and the workers at the very base here. And I think the university, as it's starting to realize, just completely losing control of its staff in particular. They had what's called a chime-in survey. It's sort of a cute reference to Denny Chimes, the bell tower here. And about 80% of staff who were surveyed felt they were poorly compensated. So the university right now is in a position where it needs has to reckon with its workers. And so I think even without a contract, we're fired up and we're encouraged by this moment and are trying to do our best to take advantage of it. One thing, though, I will mention, though, is that you're right. It is a challenge. I think we're not in a state where unions are well understood. In fact, they're fairly rare. And so I think that a conversation starter in New Jersey about unions may be very, very different from one in Alabama, where folks will say things like, I didn't even know we had a union, or I didn't know we could unionize. So I think that messaging is more complicated in a state like Alabama.
Right. I've even had people say that I thought unions were illegal in Alabama. I've had people come up to me and say, oh, I didn't know you could be in a union. I thought that was illegal, which is just wild. But, some people have that understanding of things. So, Hank, let's go to you and explain to us, by way of introduction, what you do at Rutgers and the union that you're a part of, and maybe some of the differences in public sector collective bargaining laws in New Jersey.
Yeah, so I am a member of the executive board of the adjunct faculty union at Rutgers. Technically, at Rutgers, we're called part-time lecturers, but we've been pushing hard to change the name, just because we want to make it clear that we're integral to the way the university operates. That the university, in the contemporary era that we're in, the use of adjuncts has changed dramatically. We're now central to the way education is provided across the country. So see, I'm on the executive board of the adjunct union. There are three faculty unions, all three of which voted to strike. One of them represents a lot of clinicians, doctors at the medical school and in the hospitals that are affiliated with Rutgers. So they were not in the same position to walk out as we were, because they had patients. So a lot of them had to stay on. They would come out during their lunch hours and march with us during the picketing. So there are three faculty unions. There are 12 other unions, I believe, at Rutgers, and we've organized a large coalition. We call it CREW, the Coalition of Rutgers Unions. Very creative, right? So we were agitating across campus, across our three major campuses, and we're in a very different position, I think, than you guys are down in Alabama. Rutgers, in its state constitution, recognizes the right of unions to organize and to represent workers. State workers, public workers, are in a slightly different position. While there's no law that prevents us from organizing, obviously, we've had multiple unions at Rutgers for going on 40 years, 50 years. Excuse me. There is some common law on the books tied to a lot of the protests of the late 60s. And this, at that time, Rutgers was a much more conservative state. New Jersey was a much more conservative state than it is now. And the courts ruled at that time that public worker strikes, while not against the law, were not necessarily protected. They imposed injunctions at that time. And what's happened over the years is that most public worker strikes in New Jersey have been among K-12 school teachers, and the courts have generally ruled, issued injunctions preventing them from staying out and finding them and doing that. So that's kind of where what the case law looks like. We felt and still feel that striking is legal. There's nothing on the books that says that it shouldn't be. Rutgers would have had to have made the case that we were disrupting the business of the state, and well, that's kind of what unions are supposed to do anyway. So.
Right. Yeah, and so that was part of the thing that they did, saying that that they lied and said that public sector strikes are just carte blanche illegal, and that's and like you said, that's not exactly the case. There's no law specifically prohibiting it, but they're not protected in the same way that maybe private sector strikes would be. And so you got to go to the courts and get the courts to do an injunction, and Rutgers simply had not done that yet, and so therefore the strike was not illegal at the outset. Right.
So when we voted. We had an extensive process. We began, or we've been organizing since before the end of the contract in some ways or another. But once the contract expired, we ramped up our organizing, and we had massive support amongst all of the job categories that were involved with the strike. So each of the three unions had majority votes, and that ended up being, I think, like our vote for the adjunct faculty, we had something like 55 or 60% vote. 95% of our members voted to strike. Numbers were similar for the full-timers, but we shorthand them as the full-timers. There's a union that represents the tenured and tenure-line faculty, the non-tenured faculty who are contingent in different ways than we are, and the grad students. They're in one union, and there are a couple of other job categories, I think, in their postdocs and a couple of others. There's our union, which represents the adjuncts, and then there's the medical union. So all three of those unions had similar numbers when we voted to authorize the strike. We gave Rutgers really 3 weeks to continue bargaining before we actually voted to walk out. And on the eve of the walkout, with the potential that Holloway, our president Jonathan Holloway, would seek out an injunction, the governor stepped in.
That's all just really, really great stuff that you were able to get so much support for this kind of thing, because striking is really difficult, and we're going to get a little bit more into that, but before we do, continuing with some of some personal introductions and stuff. I've read some of your pieces on your Substack, and you're a part-time lecturer in journalism, and
yes.
And you mentioned about the kind of conflicting sense of self, I guess, because you're on the other side of a microphone interviewing someone, or the other side of the table interviewing someone trying to get their story, and now people are trying to get your story. So, talk to us about that tension and kind of, I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
It is a little surreal for me. Like you said, I'm still actually, I'm more freelance now. I do a lot less writing for publications, but I have my history is as an editor and reporter on at local newspapers in New Jersey, and for state websites in New Jersey, reaching out, calling public officials, talking to people on the picket line when there are strikes, doing all of that. I'm used to getting the information from them, the stories from them, and trying to tell their stories. Now I'm in front of the camera, with a microphone being put in front of my face. It's unbelievably surreal. And I told my students when we came back into the classroom this past week that in some respects, as a journalist, I wish that this experience being the one having to answer questions, I wish I had that when I started my career, because it's given me kind of insight on what it's like to have to field questions on the spot, and it's given me a little bit. Probably, I always think of myself as being empathetic anyway, but I think I have a little bit more empathy for the person that I'm sticking my tape recorder, in their face, right? So that's been interesting. And it was a crash course for me. I've been working on the media structure for our union for going on 2 years, but I haven't been in the spokesman position. And because I was on the line, a lot of our other executive board members were in negotiations, so they were like behind locked doors for 12, 14 hours a day. Because I was on the line, and I kind of tasked myself with kind of playing free safety out there. I was kind of like troubleshooting. I didn't have a picket captain role or anything like that. So I was doing some troubleshooting, and I was kind of interceding, trying to make sure that the press had comment, and then one talking to me, and then making sure that members had an opportunity to put the word out as well. It's been different for me, definitely. Not what I'm used to. Not what I'm used to doing. I'm used to being on the other side, like you said.
For sure, and I think that some of that having that empathy, I think is really key for journalists. There's a certain sense where you do want a journalist to be kind of a view from above, and I'm not super interested in a journalist being empathetic maybe to politicians or people in power and things like this, right? But I do wonder if the kind of proletarianization of the media is part of the reason why maybe we're starting to see more sympathetic coverage of workers' issues, right? Because if you look at some of the things, and obviously there's still a lot of crazy stuff out there about how the rail strike would have cost $2 billion a day, and that's bad, and so therefore Congress should stop them from doing that. But there was a lot of really sympathetic coverage where that wasn't really the case, right? In the 90s or early 2000s or the 80s, there was a lot of the media just firmly kind of took the side of the boss. It seems to me is my reading of the history.
Yeah, I think that's been the history in recent years. I think we're just at the beginning, though, of this kind of move, maybe back to sympathetic labor coverage. I don't think that we're seeing a lot of it like on like the major networks, right? If we look at the kind of the legacy media, I don't think that we have that the coverage of the rail strike, for instance, or the academic strikes have been as positive as they could be. A lot of that coverage, I think it lacked nuance. So. Right. If you were to ask people, when you ask an average person out in the community, why would somebody go on strike? Why is there, my dad, for instance, he's like, why are you guys going on strike? You just want money?
Right.
And well, yeah, we all wanted raises, of course, right. But the lack of nuance in a lot of the coverage has meant that, for instance, with the rail strike, the real issue being that scheduling and sick time, that was like central. It got short shrift, and like you said, we ended up with politicians talking about how it would disrupt the economy, but not asking what the lives of these rail workers were like, right. And what dangers the scheduling and lack of sick time might pose to the communities around where the rails are. And then, in short shrift, we end up with East Palestine. So, I don't want to make it seem like it's a direct link, but there are connections with that.
Well, and I think that question is a really good place to start digging into this situation at Rutgers. Why did you go on strike? What were the issues about?
Each of the academic unions had different specific needs when we walked out. So for the adjuncts, we boiled our we had three major demands: equal pay, pay equity. That meant that we wanted to be paid on the same scale as the non-tenure track full-timers. Right now, we before the strike, we'll say, before all of this organizing, we were probably paid at 60% of what they were paid for doing similar work, right? They're doing it full time. We're not asking if they're making $90,000 a year. We're not asking for $90,000. But if we work half as much as they do, we want to be paid, about half what they get. So
Seems
pay
reasonable.
equity. Yeah, I mean, you would think that equal pay is enshrined in law, right? We have the Civil Rights Act. One of my colleagues in our union is a labor historian, and as he said, I mean, the idea of pay equity it was central to the Civil Rights Movement and the Civil Rights Act. So, we've kind of we've been having this conversation about pay equity in a lot of ways for a long time, but the capitalist system doesn't seem to be too interested in the capitalist system right now is looking to kind of push pay down across the board and create pay equity that way. We want to raise everybody up. So that was one element of it. Another element was job security. We are rehired semester to semester. So I could teach 2 classes in the fall, but not know if I'm coming back in the spring or the next fall. And that wreaks havoc with a lot of people's lives. If you are, especially if you're a younger adjunct, a lot of younger adjuncts are people who are trying to get into academia and are unable to find full-time work. Many of them have kids. If you're working on a semester-to-semester basis, getting childcare becomes a nightmare. Planning those kinds of things out becomes a nightmare. And so we want job security. We want to know that we're going to be back, especially if we've proven ourselves. So I'm just finishing up my 10th year as an adjunct at Rutgers. I'm lucky that our journalism department is run by really conscientious pro-labor people. So I know that they're going to say, okay, you're coming back. I'm coming back. I'm not really worried about it. But not every one of the departments at Rutgers operates the way that my journalism department runs. And many of those people are, they get their appointment letters late. They get their offers late. They just don't know what's going to happen from semester to semester. So we want to change that. We want longer term appointments. We want that to be accelerating. So the longer you're here, the less you have, less uncertainty you face. And the last major point was healthcare. We as adjuncts don't have access to healthcare. We're excluded from all the plans, and we want to see that change. The graduate students are looking for guaranteed funding. It differs department. I learned a lot about how universities operate during this stretch of organizing. But grad workers are appointed on some get 1 year appointments, some get 2, but most of them, when they enter a program, they're looking at the likelihood of having to spend 4 or 5 years doing their research so that they can write their dissertation. I mean, that's why they're there. The research is is not just for them. It's something that helps the university. It'll be published by the university. It'll be housed at the university's libraries. Often the research is done in conjunction with full-time faculty at Rutgers. And so they need more stable, guaranteed funding that's centralized, so that there's it comes down to this idea of some level of certainty, so that they know. For the life of their time at Rutgers, they will have the ability to complete their degree. They don't have to worry that that they'll be cut loose or that there won't be work for them. Full-timers were looking for more control over scheduling. Rutgers automated its scheduling system, and it's been really difficult. Courses get dropped, courses get changed. Scheduling patterns that may have been in place for years get upended. And so the full-timers are they're very concerned about that. The non-tenure track faculty wanted job security. They wanted a potential path maybe to tenure. And then the medical folks are looking for wage increases that put them in line with other people around the country who do what they do. And they are the medical union is a kind of a legacy union. They came in. Rutgers Medical School is relatively new. There was a state medical school for years, and there were some corruption issues, and so the state had stepped in, forced a merger of the medical school with Rutgers, and so now these medical workers and medical teachers are part of the Rutgers community. And there's a debate that I'll be honest, I don't fully understand about detenuring and kind of remaking what's going on over there. They want the protections that they deserve for their jobs, and and that's just three of the unions. Other unions, there's another union that is in the process of a strike pledge, and that's the university's. It's called the Union of Rutgers Administrators, which I think they do this. They probably do similar things to what you were talking about, John. Right? So they're without them, the university would collapse. They order the food, they run the dining halls, they manage the bus system, they schedule the classes, they do they field requests for diplomas, they do all of that. They do it behind the scenes, and nobody ever thinks about what they do. So they're now they're much closer to a potential strike. So that's kind of it's kind of the layout of where we are.
And the result of the strike was that there's what the bargaining committee is called a tentative framework. But the tentative framework, still not a tentative agreement, which is what typically ends strikes, but the strike hasn't been ended. It's suspended and, based on the assumption that they will be getting a tentative agreement. But this tentative framework lays out a lot of wins in these areas. So can you talk to us, you mentioned in one of your pieces that, it's not exactly everything that you wanted, but it's a lot. And so, what did you win? Where were y'all wanting to go further? And then I guess something that I'm interested in as somebody who's never been in a strike, as a federal employee, I wonder, how do you balance the pragmatic kind of stuff? Like, okay, it's fine that we didn't get everything that we wanted here because we got a lot of stuff, versus, are we leaving part of our membership out to dry for the benefit of are we allowing the boss to kind of crack us up in some way? So walk us through those things. What did you win? Where are you wanting to? Where were y'all wanting to go a little bit further? And then how do you weigh these things? Right.
The fact that there are three unions doing the negotiations is complicated things. I mean, we had to build a coalition. That one of the things that we did when we just before we started this is we attempted to merge the three unions into one big faculty union, which I still think would have strengthened our hand even more than where we were, because it would have made it impossible to peel people off. Right. That's always that's always where management wants to go. Let's get a deal with this group, and they'll like it, so the other group won't get anything. And that's a real difficult thing to navigate, because, we have a responsibility directly to our individual members for each of these unions. So, and there's a legal issue with, if we get a TA, let's say, one of the unions gets a TA, they have a responsibility to put it out to a vote of their membership. And if they don't, if they try to drag their heels, there are some potential legal ramifications for that. Because we're not allowed technically to go on strike for the other unions. So we went out on strike together, understanding the potential pitfalls that we would face. So the full-time union won some significant changes in scheduling. There's going to be a lot of it is being handled through new committees that are being created, but there is something that's going to be put in place to deal with the scheduling issue. They won raises for all of their members. there are still some significant stuff that has to be hashed out about, in particular about graduate student needs. There's some language in the framework around the length of their funding and the recognition of a class of graduate student. It's called a grad fellow. What happens is that one semester they might be a graduate worker. The next semester they may be functioning primarily as a student doing research. And when they move from graduate assistant to grad fellow, they drop out of the union. They lose their health insurance. And they work, they're working on research that's going to benefit the university. They then go back to doing, let's say, the next semester, the next year, doing graduate assistant work or TA work, and they get pulled back into the union. So their health care is on, it's off, it's on, it's off. And again, as you can imagine, it creates some amazing difficulties in their lives. So there's some language in there that's supposed to address that, but not all the grad students at this point are happy. They think a little bit more needs to be done at the very least. For us as part-time people, as adjuncts, the framework has calls for us to get significant raises. In the first year, we're looking at 30 some odd percent. And depending on that's for faculty that stays at the same level. So it could be as much as 45% if you are somebody who gets the upfront raise and then gets a bump tied to a change in status. So I'm technically what's called a part-time lecturer 2. Under the new contract, and one of the things that we're still trying to iron out is where I would like somebody like me would fall. I could move up to, let's say, a part-time lecturer, or what we're hoping will be called an adjunct lecturer, or I think it's just a lecturer, lecturer 3 or lecturer 4, and that would include bumps in money as well. So some of our members could see, 40% increases that first year. Some of them will see less, but the pay structure is going to be. We're not going to be at the beginning. We won't be where the non-tenure track faculty are. By the end, we'll be close to where they are. They'll be getting their raises. So we'll still be a little behind, but it'll be much closer. And that money is going to be a game changer for so many people who are teaching on this part-time level.
Right. And John had mentioned to me this morning that y'all had actually gotten retroactive pay actually for the time of the strike as well, which is really impressive and
right.
important for your members. And so John, as a college worker in Alabama, I'm interested in some of your thoughts about this situation and what it means for your members and your organizing and if there's anything that you'd be interested in asking Hank.
Absolutely. And Hank, y'all's accomplishment has really been extremely encouraging to us down here. I think seeing the ways in which what you're sharing is that resonates with me, because so many of our members and so many of the folks we've talked to as we canvas on campus are sharing the exact same concerns and are experiencing the exact same problems of, the complete lack of access for healthcare for our part-time temporary instructors, for folks who do have access to healthcare, especially we talked a lot to our custodial staff. We're seeing folks who do not have have not received any training on or guidance on how to use their FSA or HSA accounts, and have heard about during the transition from technical vendors for those accounts, people losing access to their FSAs, their money just rolls over and is gone. So I think seeing what y'all have accomplished is not just an encouragement, it's also a plan for us. We're still at the very early stages of building power here in the state of Alabama on campuses. So our primary focus has been just growing membership and helping to dispel a lot of the confusion and misunderstanding and really anti-labor propaganda that is so pervasive down here, that has led to a culture where a lot of workers are fearful. When we have conversations about labor organizing, the default reaction for some folks is fear. And I think seeing y'all accomplish what you have and helping also, as you mentioned, bringing together different factions, different unions into something that's more wall to wall. We're small enough to where we have to be wall to wall. We have grad students faculty and staff all in the same group. But seeing that that's been successful for y'all has helped to really centralize power and organization from that has been that's I think very helpful to see. The one question I have for you, Hank, thinking along those lines, is what are some of the obstacles y'all have overcome in growing membership on campus? What, and especially as y'all work to include a broader collection of individuals on campus, including staff, what have been some of the challenges and how have y'all worked to overcome that?
I think one of the challenges that we face, and we continue to face, is, when you bring different job categories together, there are different needs. And we worked really hard to build solidarity through conversation, trust. It took a long time. Not every negotiations in recent history that we've been engaged with, not every contract has gone smoothly. Not every, there is a history of unions taking care of one group and not necessarily the other here. So we had to work really hard. The way that we've overcome a lot of this is through conversations. We spent, I got involved in the union in probably fall of 21, just due to help with doing some media work as a journalist, and quickly found myself being mobilized, so I jumped in with both feet, and we've been running since then. So we started with an effort to merge our unions, which got us talking to our members as part-time lecturers and adjuncts. We started talking to our members about power, the need for power, as we were getting ready to go into a contract campaign. So these conversations for us started early. We spent probably 3 months working on the merger campaign. We got 1,100 signatures on this merger request that represented probably about 65% of, not of the membership, but of the bargaining unit. So we have about 52%, 53% is our density. I always say getting part-time people to sign up for a union is really difficult, and a lot of times our membership is not stable because people aren't necessarily teaching every semester. So that's a pretty decent number considering. But we had about 65% of all part-time lecturers, all adjuncts, vote to merge with a full-time union, which would have created a much larger union. The medical union held the same vote a little bit after us with similar results, right? So that got us talking to our members early before we started on the contract campaign, and it got us talking with the other unions, and it put the notion of unity out there in a way that I can't speak to what has happened before, but for me, it put unity out there in a way that I don't think I've ever felt on campus. We also started polling our members very early on. This actually occurred before I got involved. We wanted to know what they wanted. So we wanted to make sure that our contract campaign represented the needs and desires of the full membership. It's been very important to us as an adjunct union, and I think it's important to the other unions as well that we be as democratic and open as possible. Transparency has been kind of our mantra. We don't want to surprise people. We know not everybody's going to be happy with everything that comes out of this contract, but we want to make sure that everybody feels a part of it. So, like for instance, Monday and Tuesday we're planning 2 big membership meetings. And we're doing 2. Because some people may teach Monday night and can't make it, so they're going to come to the Tuesday one. We want them to know exactly where things are. There's been some problems during the strike in terms of communications because of the way the governor's involvement kind of locked everybody in a room in the state capitol. But we've made a real strong effort to just keep talking, and I think that. that's been kind of the single most important thing. The more members we talk to, the more we seem to get them on our side. And when we've run into members who are afraid, who are like we had a number of people who are real strong labor people who said, we can't strike, or this action is going to hurt our students. And we had to have conversations around that, about how this is, we're not out to harm students. We're out to support them, and we can support them better by winning a better contract. Not to mention that we have tremendous and inspiring support from students on the line. We had students organizing concerts, raising money for our strike fund. It was really inspiring. And I think for a lot of us, and this kind of gets off the question, a lot of us feel more connected to the campus and the university now than we did before, right? I'm on campus a couple of days a week as a part-time lecturer. I graduated from Rutgers, and this is the most connected that I've felt, and that's because of these conversations. It allowed us to kind of cut across lines. So.
Yeah, that is so extraordinarily encouraging to hear, Hank. And and that's, I think, one thing that we're seeing is the more folks we get into the room, the more conversation we have, the more that we're having that's on a smaller, very small scale, but growing that same effect. And one thing I want to share too that resonated with me, in what you shared, Hank, is that a lot of times folks will say, well, I love the university. I love this working for serving the students. And it's like, we do too. And we want it. We love it so much. We want it to be done better. And we want to create an environment where people thrive. And that kind of reframing for me too has been so helpful in getting me fired up about having these conversations, is that it's not about being adversarial necessarily. It's about calling everyone up. Like, we have to be building a better campus community. And if folks are standing in the way of that, they need to reevaluate what kind of campus they want, because if they want the best possible campus, they need to support their workers.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, that's why I make a point of, I have my Rutgers shirt on, right? We have a lot of union shirts. So I wore them during the strike, but I make a point of wearing some of this Rutgers stuff, especially when I'm talking about this stuff, because I want that there's a message, I think, that comes with that says I'm a member of the union. I'm working for the workers, but I'm also a member of this community. I'm an alum. I'm a faculty member. I am, my niece attends Rutgers. This is central to it. Really, in many ways, Rutgers has become central to my identity, and that's important to me. And I want people to understand that that's why I'm in the middle of this. I want Rutgers to be the best Rutgers it can be, right? So, yeah.
Hank, John, I could talk to y'all about this all day, but we do have to, we've got to go ahead and wrap it up. I think this is, fantastic stuff. Hank, very, very excited for y'all over there. We're going to continue to monitor the situation. Hope you'll keep us updated if, as things progress, and congratulations. Good luck, and keep up the fight.
Yeah, I have a piece. Should be early next week in the Progressive.
Awesome.
On this as well. So, if you want to send your listeners over there, they
Perfect.
can see. So,
all
excellent.
Right. Thanks all. John Gilmer is a member of the United Campus Workers of America at the University of Alabama, and Hank Callett is a member of one of the Rutgers unions that went on strike last week.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.